What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing. The Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series will continue its conversation with you concerning the complete history of boxing. The illustration that I have before you is very important to the conversation that I conducted to you 2 videos prior. I talked about my top 3 greatest trainer in boxing history. And that was Harry Wiley Sr. Now, Jimmy DeForest, Ray Arcel, those are the top 3. Harry Wiley Sr. was one of the most influential trainers, along with Jimmy DeForest. In all of boxing, in my opinion. I'm going to explain to you why. Jimmy DeForest encouraged Harry Wiley Sr. to become a trainer. And those who understand boxing know that Jimmy DeForest was just about the greatest trainer of all times. The men that he trained, the Harry Grebs, the Jack Dempseys, on and on and on and on and on. Had so many great fighters, Mickey Walkers, on and on. And he encouraged Harry Wiley Sr. because Harry Wiley Sr. understood the game at an early age. His gift was hand wrapping his opponents and hand wrapping his charge and the fighters in the gym and world-class champions such as Sam Langford, such as Lou Ambers, such as Sammy Mandel. He even worked with Jack Dempsey. He even worked with Joe Jeanette, and on and on and on. You see, what Harry Wiley Sr. would do, my grandfather knew Harry Wiley Sr. He laughed when I brought his name up. And he told me how he wrapped the hands. He would take his thumb, he would place it in the palm of the hand of his fighter. Then he would take his fingers and he would wrap around the gauze, around the phalanges, pulling the phalanges towards the palm of his hand as he would wrap around, one by one, going around the metacarpals. But he did it in a way where your metacarpals would not shift at all. And then he would go around with wraps. You never broke your hand, you never sprained your hand, you never fractured your metacarpals. And your hands were like rocks, solid bricks. Completely legal. He was good. Why I have this illustration? This is the 1932 Olympic team that would go to Los Angeles. Now, there were 3 black fighters on this team. You have one in this photo. Now, Nate Bohr was out of New England. He was a very, very good amateur fighter. This is Nate Bohr. Next to him was Johnny Miller. This is him right here. Harry Wiley Sr. Johnny Miller is a black fighter. He trained Johnny Miller. As a matter of fact, Harry Wiley Sr. was the first black Olympic coach that you ever had. When Harry Wiley Sr. came on the scene, every weight division in the Nationals won gold. They all came in first place. That has never happened before Harry Wiley Sr. He's won 3 national titles, or I should say 3 AAU titles in a row. The entire team. So he was called to lead this team. And he was getting these young men prepared. But as I explained to you, Johnny Miller was the main guy who was having problems. And Harry Wiley Sr. didn't know about it. Spike Webb, who was the coach for that team before Harry came in, was told, and he didn't straighten out the problem. Spike Webb right here. And when Harry decided to address the matter, Mountain Landis, who hired Harry Wiley Sr. to begin with, he decided to fire him. So you would have 5 medals come in, 2 gold and 3 bronze. I owe that to Harry Wiley Sr. He gets full credit from me. One of the men who would win a bronze medal would become a world champion. This man right here. His name is Lou Salica. He would win the bantamweight championship title. I met Lou Salica. He lived in Brooklyn. Had a very strong Italian accent. And he told me some things. Racism was at its highest during those years. Amazing. Harry Wiley Sr. would train so many fighters. Did you know Henry Armstrong was going to be on that team? And Harry Wiley Sr. prepared Henry Armstrong really to become a world champion. He made the adjustments. Henry Armstrong was the best shoulder roll fighter that you had. If you want to know what the real shoulder roll is, watch Henry Armstrong. Things you see around today, that's not a shoulder roll. You don't stand up and turn your shoulder. That's not a shoulder roll. There was a mechanism that they made for Henry Armstrong. It was a concrete bucket with a stick that swung around where he had to dip and dive, up and down, bob from side to side, twist his shoulders, twist his hips. That's a shoulder roll. I don't know what. Anyway, I'm going to show you a fighter that Henry Armstrong would face for the trials of the Olympic Games. Now, he sparred with half of these guys. and preparation for his trials. This man right here. You can see his head. His name is Spider Roach. Now, Johnny Hines was a very good fighter as well. Henry sparred with him many rounds. Harry Wiley Sr. had opened up a gymnasium, the Salem Crescent Club. But he would go to Grubb's Gymnasium because the man who was in that gym was Dyer Darlings. He was a conditioner and athletic health trainer. He was a fitness coach. He understood boxing. And he worked with no problem with Harry Wiley Sr. So Harry Wiley would bring William Ward, his name was Kid Norfolk, to Grubb's gym. Now, William Ward, let's talk about him for one moment. Born September 20th, 1895 in Belmont, Virginia. He died April 15th, 1968, 74 years of age at the time of his death. Had a record of 151 total bouts, 115 wins, 48 knockouts, 28 losses, and 8 draws. Began boxing November 29th, 1910, March 1926 is when he hung up the gloves. I'll explain to you in specific detail more information on William Ward and conversation with my grandfather. He knew who William Ward was. All of them fighters in Harlem. All of them fighters in Grubb's Gymnasium, at the Athletic Club, Salem Crescent Club. My grandfather knew them all. I can tell you things that's not in books because I spoke to him specifically. He hung out with them guys. Now, Kid Norfolk will win the Panamanian Heavyweight Championship crown from Rough House Ware. 25 rounds, March 14th, 1915. They fought in Colon City, Panama. He would lose the Panamanian Heavyweight Championship crown to the Joplin Ghost Jeff Clark, May 16th, 1915 in 20 rounds. It's at the Plaza de Torreorisa in Panama City. He would re-win the Panamanian Heavyweight Championship crown from Big Bill Tate, June 14th, 1916. 20 rounds. Once again, Panama City. We'll lose to Sam Langford on December 17th, 1917 by second round knockout at the Stockyards Stadium in Denver, Colorado for the World Colored Heavyweight Championship crown. We lose in 9 rounds to Lee Anderson, May 20th, 1921, the Arizona Athletic Club in Phoenix for the World Colored Light Heavyweight Championship crown. Now, Lee Anderson, I don't know if I spoke in this series about Lee Anderson. I will talk about him. Lee Anderson was the Harlem Bully. That's what they called him in Harlem. He worked for the number racketeers, I should say. You owed any money, and Lee Anderson would knock on your door. Bumpy Johnson made sure he got his money. Lee Anderson was tough like Sonny Liston. So Kid Norfolk, Lee Anderson sparred many rounds together in Grubb's gym. You had a fighter by the name of Big Boy Brown. Harry Bobo. Daniel Nathan Cox. These are all heavyweights that Harry Wiley Sr. would work with. December 30th, 1921, Jamaica Kid was defeated at the New York Madison Square Garden, 8 rounds on points. He would win the vacant World Colored Light Heavyweight Championship crown. May 25th, 1925. He'd be in the ring with Jack Reddick, losing 12 rounds on points. He won a Canadian Light Heavyweight Championship crown in Canada. He was in the ring with Balansiki. He was in the ring with Harry Greb twice. In the ring with Lee Anderson, Jamaica Kid, Harry Wills, Clem Johnson, Tiger Flowers, Lester Johnson, Jack Chase, Jack Blackburn, Cleve Hawkins, Big Bill Tate, Clem Johnson, Joe Jeanette, Dan Porky Flynn, Zulu Kid, Billy Miss, Gunboat Smith, Arthur Perkley, Larry Temple, Black Bill, Jack Taylor, Black Kid Williams, Tut Jackson, Tommy Gibbons. I'm just trying to think of these guys at the top of my head. The stories my grandfather told me about William Ward. He used to play dice, CeeLo, and he would shoot the dice up against the wall. He would always wear his hat to the side. He would come into the gymnasium. He didn't speak too much English. But he spoke enough English that you understood where he was coming from. Kid Norfolk, William Ward. He was managed by Leo P. Flynn. Weighed about 165 to 183 pounds, give or take. But Kid Norfolk and Panama Joe Gans, I shared the story several times, had sparred with Bill Brennan, preparing him for the 1920 Madison Square Garden event with Jack Dempsey. Panama Joe Gans basically hit Bill Brennan anytime he felt like it. Kid Norfolk got in the ring and sparred with him, beat him half to death. Flynn told his men to take it easy on him because he's going to be preparing to fight Jack Dempsey. And they couldn't resist. Harry Wiley Sr. had prepared these men not only to be able to punch, but to take a punch. He knew exactly where to place punches, did Harry Wiley Sr., in vital areas. He knew when these fighters are supposed to throw the punches, at what time they should throw the punches, how to counter punch correctly in between the heart. You punch with your opponent if he's a puncher, because a puncher will always elevate off of his back foot with power. In order to do that, he has to use a certain level of oxygen to get the punch off with consistency. The oxygen flow rapidifies itself so many seconds at a time, which means you have so much time to recover. Harry Wiley Sr. understood all of that. He got a lot of that information from Jimmy DeForest. Jimmy DeForest was a scientific trainer. Lost art. Jimmy DeForest was very impressed with Harry Wiley Sr. and knew he could do the job. He carried the bucket for Jack Dempsey. Wrapped the hands of Sam Langford. Wrapped the hands of Joe Jeanette. Wrapped the hands of Lou Ambers and Sammy Mandel. Oh. Do you know who this man is? It was Harry Harold Smith. He was known as the Harlem Thunderbolt. Those in his immediate circle called him the Harlem Globetrotter. Most people don't know that. Born October 28, 1907 in Kingston, Jamaica. Had a dialect. He died September 19, 1933 in Chicago, Illinois. Stood 6 foot 1 inch, weighed 155 to 175 pounds. He was managed by Dave Brown. Now, the thing with him, very intelligent young man. His father owned real estate in Harlem. He owned real estate in Jamaica and brought that business over to Harlem. Owned a limousine business. He wanted his son to become a dentist. Harry wanted to become a mechanical engineer. That's all Harry Wiley Sr.'s dad wanted, is for him to become a dentist. Meant a great deal to that family. And Harry Smith, who worked in a novelty store one day, and they had an area where they sold food, and he was attending to a customer. Another young man picked up the tip. After that, customer would walk off the table. Harry Smith wanted his money. Young man appeared to not know what Harry Smith was talking about. Harry Smith said, "We'll meet outside." That they did. Harry Smith would wind up getting a bloody nose, but he fought. Walked around the corner, 116th Street, to Grubb's Gymnasium. He'd run into Dave Brown, be introduced to him. Dave Brown saw him in a heavy bag, said, "My God." He hit like a heavyweight. He would become the colored world middleweight champion, November 16, 1929, against the Pride of Harlem, Julius Williams, Jack McVeigh, at the New York Olympia Boxing Club. It went 15 rounds. McVeigh was 24 years old. Smith was 22 years old. McVeigh had a record of 81 wins, 26 losses, and 5 draws. Smith had a record of 21 wins, 1 loss, no draws. Now, as an amateur, Harry Smith had a record of 65 wins, no losses, with 55 knockouts. 30 of those knockouts were in the first round. When he would begin to box, March 25th, 1927, against Tom Ferriero in Harlem, he would win a Canadian Amateur Middleweight Championship. He won an Inner City Middleweight Championship, the Metropolitan Amateur Middleweight Championship. March 4th, 1928, Harry Smith would be a professional, What was most impressive about this young man, he would take on Homer Robinson, Boston, Massachusetts. He would stop him in 7 rounds. I want you to understand something. I want you to understand something. Study Homer Robinson. He was known as the Black Ghost. He was born January 6, 1904, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Weighed 150 to 162 pounds. Homer Robinson used to spar with Charlie Burley, if you didn't know that. Homer Robinson had a record of 42-1 as an amateur. He was so feared in the amateurs, there were fighters who refused to face him. They knew that he was next on the list, they didn't fight him. Said to hell with him. This man can punch. That one loss came to Harry Smith. When Harry Smith fought in the Metropolitan AAU Amateur Tournament at Madison Square Garden, Jack Dempsey was the referee. Dempsey said, this N-word punches like a mule's kick. In whatever weight division he turns professional in, he'll get all knockouts. Jack Dempsey. Homer Robinson was in the ring with fighters such as Powell Reed, Panama Joe Gans. He lost to Maxie Rosenblum. Lost to Harry Smith. Now, Harry Smith would take on a fighter from Bronzeville, Brooklyn. His name was Powell Silvers. Fought him January 7th, 1930. Fought him at the Brooklyn Broadway Arena. You had 2 arenas in Brooklyn that was very famous. The Eastern Parkway Arena and the Broadway Arena. And you hear me say many times that a lot of the fighters who fought currently, a lot of them guys wouldn't be champions because you had too many arenas, you had too many fighters. Some of the arenas only won 8 rounds. Before you got a chance to get to Madison Square Garden, you had to have so many fights, unless you were well connected. And you had to fight guys like Homer Robinson, Powell Silvers, Jack McVeigh, guys who could punch. Harry Smith defeated a Canadian light heavyweight champion. His name was Charlie Ballinger. Look up Charlie Ballinger. Now, Smith was called a Harlem Thunderbolt by the Amsterdam News. He was recognized as the new Brown Panther by the Pittsburgh Courier. All the newspapers were giving him a name. They didn't know what to call him. He was a sensation. Harry Smith is my mine, greatest middleweight champion of all times. I don't care about all the other stuff. He was avoided by Mickey Walker. $50,000, then $70,000 was offered to Mickey Walker's camp. They turned it down. Money was offered to Maxie Rosenblum. They turned it down. This man was a problem. His losses came between 32 and 33 when he got sick. He would relocate himself to Chicago. But that night when Harry Smith would take on the pride of Harlem, Julius Williams, Jack McVeigh, was like what you're trying to get now with Earl Spence and Terrence Crawford. That's what that was like. And Harlem was looking forward to it like you won't believe. I talked to you about Frank Craig, the Harlem Coffee Cooler, and Joe Butler, Philadelphia. This is what you were looking at. You see, in New York, and my dad took me to a lot of those spots. On the Lower East Side, in Hell's Kitchen, in different areas by the Bowery of New York, you had sections, neighborhoods. And each section had their own champions. The Jewish community had their own sections. Ruby Goldstein, Sid Terrace, Benny Vogel. Then you had the Italians when you went to Brooklyn, Rocky Graziano and Harold Green. Go to Harlem. You had Danny Cox. In fact, Harry Wiley Sr., you see, he used to work with Jack Blackburn. A lot of people don't know that. And Blackburn was a mastermind. And Harry Wiley Sr., as he trained the Sammy Mendel's and he trained the Lou Ambers, Lou Salicas, many of them who would become champion. But he had Danny Cox. He had Louis Spider Valentine, Walker Smith, who at that time was called Smitty. He had a fighter named Ray Robinson. Cannon Jenkins, Canada Lee, Carbon Rockfire, Danny Jones, Split Johnson, Jeremiah Jackson. These are the fighters at that time that he had. 1936, 7 and 8. Harry Smith knew someone who knew someone. Had connections to the Harlem Opera House. It was located across the Teresa Hotel on 125th Street in Harlem. They got jobs for Ray Robinson, Danny Cox, Spider Valentine. They worked in the Harlem Opera